Hola clase, ¿cómo están? ¿Bien? So, I'm not in today because I have an appointment, but I'm going to talk to you guys about a new grammar topic from this chapter, which is the subjunctive mood, okay? So, before we go into the subjunctive in Spanish, it's important that we understand what is the subjunctive in English. Now, the subjunctive is not a verb tense. The subjunctive is a mood. Okay, so that's kind of a hard concept to understand, but you already know two moods. You have the indicative that includes the present tense, that includes the preterite and the imperfect, and you've already learned some of them in the imperative mode, which are the commands, like usted commands, ustedes, tú commands. Now, being that it is a mood, it is a way of speaking. And that way of speaking encompasses also different verb tenses. So we're going to get started today understanding the present tense in Spanish. But before we go into that, let's take a look at some of the examples of the subjunctive in English, because in the English language it's not very commonly used. Look at the example, God save the Queen. Okay, now God, it is singular, so it should be saves. Okay, like if you substitute the name God by Bob and Bob save, that would be Bob saves. But you conjugate it differently because you're utilizing the subjunctive. So another example here, like heaven helps us. So it's not heaven helps us, it's heaven help us. Now, it has come into lack of use in the English language because it has evolved, but in Latin-based languages the subjunctive is kind of a big deal. Okay, so let's look at a couple of examples here that would be good for you to know. Okay, so let's see this one here. I only ask that he cease behaving. Now you see the conjugation for cease, for he is ceases, but in this case we used he. It is vital that they be stopped at once. Now, everybody know that the conjugation of they is they are. It's not they be, but in this case we're using they be because we're using subjunctive. Now, I want you to look at two components here on this example. So first one, let's see. I only ask that he sees. And then the second part, it is vital that they be stopped. Or the last one, is it necessary that she work all hours of the day? Notice that each one of these sentences have two parts. It has a main clause, for example, I only ask, or it is vital, or is it really necessary? And then it has a dependent clause, which goes attached to that main clause. And in this case, we have he sees, or be stopped, and she worked. And it is attached, the two clauses, by the relative pronoun que. So, in English, sometimes we have situations where the main clause has a verb, or it's written in a way that triggers the second part of the sentence to be written in a completely different manner. So that's what we're going to learn today in Spanish. We're going to get started learning what situations and what verbs can you put in the main clause that will trigger the conjugation of the verb a little bit differently. Now, you see, in English, we drop the S, or we change they are for they be. Now, in Spanish, you're going to notice that the subjunctive is going to be very familiar to you because guess what? The subjunctive conjugation, it's just like a negative to command, and it's just like a usted or ustedes command. In other words, in order to conjugate in the subjunctive, all you're going to need to do is conjugate in the dual form, drop the O, and do the opposite endings. So, for example, in this case here, let's look at those first three examples. let's look at the verb parar, to stop. Okay, so parar, the yo form is paro. Drop the O, par. Opposite endings would be pare. So that would be the conjugation you would use if you were to translate that sentence in the subjunctive. Okay, they be stopped. Okay, well, that's the verb to be, right? Ser. Now, remember that ser in the usted and ustedes command and the negative to is one of the dishes verbs, right? So the verb ser is sea, seas, sea, seamos, sean. So if you were to conjugate that, that would be sean. Work. Everybody knows, Spanish 1, trabajar. Okay, well, the conjugation for trabajar, we're going to conjugate for she. So, yo form, trabajo. Drop the O, trabaj. Opposite endings, trabaje. Okay, and so forth. So, today, we're going to talk about the mechanics first. In other words, how do you conjugate a verb in the subjunctive? And then as we progress, we're going to learn all the different situations when to use the subjunctive. Kind of like we learn how to conjugate in the imperfect tense, right? Compraba, comía. And then we looked at when to use preterite and when to use the imperfect, culminating in that project, cuando era niño. So we're going to be doing something very similar. First, it's going to be a little bit more mechanical because we are practicing the conjugation. But then we're going to get started looking at situations when to use the subjunctive, okay?